Jake Martinez wiped the sweat from his forehead as he watched the angry purple clouds gather above his small mining station. The plasma storm was coming fast, much faster than the weather reports had predicted. He had maybe 20 minutes before the electromagnetic waves would fry every piece of electronics on the surface of Kepler 442c. Another perfect day in paradise, Jake muttered to himself as he rushed to secure his equipment. The mining world was not much to look at. Red rocks, dusty plains, and 3 small moons that made the nights look strange. Jake had been living here alone for 2 years now, working the mineral deposits that made the big corporations rich. It was not the life he had planned, but after leaving the military, he needed somewhere quiet to think. The wind picked up, carrying the sharp smell of ozone. Jake sealed the last of his mining tools in the protective storage unit and headed toward his shelter. The small building was made of thick metal walls that could handle the plasma storms that hit the planet every few weeks. As he reached for the door handle, something caught his eye. A dark shape lay crumpled near the communication tower, about 50 meters away. At first, Jake thought it might be debris blown by the wind, but as he looked closer, he saw it move. What the hell? Jake grabbed his emergency kit and ran toward the shape. The plasma storm was getting closer. The air crackled with energy, and Jake could feel the hair on his arms standing up. He had maybe 10 minutes before the storm hit with full force. When he reached the dark shape, Jake stopped in shock. It was not debris. It was a person, or at least something that looked like a person. The being was female in shape, about the same size as a human woman. But her skin had a strange shimmer to it, like oil on water. Thin lines of blue light ran across her arms and face in patterns that looked almost like tattoos. Her clothes were torn and burned, and dark liquid that might have been blood covered her left shoulder. Jake knelt beside her and checked for signs of life. Her chest rose and fell slowly. Her skin felt warm, but not quite the same temperature as human skin. The glowing lines on her body pulsed weakly, like a heartbeat made of light. "Hey, can you hear me?" Jake asked. The being did not respond. Jake looked up at the storm clouds. Lightning was starting to flash between them, and he could hear the low rumble that meant the plasma waves were almost here. Jake had a choice. He could leave this strange being here and save himself. No one would blame him. He did not know what she was or where she came from. For all he knew, she could be dangerous. But as Jake looked at her face, he saw something that made the choice easy. Even unconscious, there was pain written across her features. She was hurt and alone, just like he had been when he first came to this planet. "Okay, let's get you inside," Jake said. He lifted the being carefully, surprised by how light she felt. Her head fell against his shoulder, and he could see that her hair was not really hair at all, but thin strands that moved on their own like they were alive. The storm hit just as Jake reached his shelter door. The first plasma wave rolled across the ground like invisible fire, making all the metal around them hum and spark. Jake punched in the door code with his elbow and stumbled inside just as the main storm arrived. Outside, the world turned white with energy. The thick walls of the shelter shook, but they held. Jake had built this place well. He carried the being to his small medical area and laid her on the examination table. Under the bright lights, he could see her injuries more clearly. The wound on her shoulder looked like it had been made by some kind of energy weapon. There were also smaller cuts and burns on her arms and legs. Jake was not a doctor, but his military training had taught him basic first aid. He cleaned the wounds with antiseptic and bandaged them as best he could. The being's blood was red like human blood, but it seemed to glow slightly in the dark. As he worked, Jake noticed more details about his unexpected guest. Her skin was not just shimmering, it actually changed color slightly, like a chameleon. The glowing lines on her body formed complex patterns that reminded him of circuit boards or star maps. Her hands had 5 fingers like a human, but they were longer and more elegant. "What are you?" Jake whispered, as he finished bandaging her shoulder. The being's eyes suddenly opened. They were large and completely black, like deep space. For a moment, Jake felt like he was falling into them. The being sat up quickly, looking around the room with alert confusion. When her eyes found Jake, she tensed like she was ready to fight or run. "Easy," Jake said, holding up his hands. "You're safe. I'm not going to hurt you." The being studied him for a long moment. Then she spoke, and her voice was unlike anything Jake had ever heard. It was musical, with tones that seemed to come from more than one place at once. "You helped me," she said. The words came out slowly, like she was not used to speaking. "This language—" "You were hurt," Jake replied. "There was a storm coming. I could not just leave you out there." The being looked down at her bandaged wounds, then back at Jake. There was something in her expression that he could not read. Surprise, maybe, or confusion. "I am called Zara," she said finally. "Jake," he replied. "Jake Martinez. Welcome to my home, I guess." Zara looked around the small shelter. It was not much, just a few rooms with basic furniture, some old books, and pictures of Earth on the walls. But it was clean and warm, and it had kept them both safe from the storm. "You ask nothing in return?" Zara asked. Jake shrugged. "Should I? You needed help. That's what people do. We help each other." Zara stared at him like he had just said something impossible. Outside, the plasma storm continued to rage, filling the night with strange colors and sounds. Inside the shelter, two beings from different worlds sat in the quiet safety Jake had built with his own hands. Neither of them knew that. This simple act of kindness would change the galaxy forever. Jake woke up to the sound of silence. After living on Kepler 442c for 2 years, he had learned that silence meant the plasma storm was over. He stretched and looked around his small bedroom, remembering the events of the night before. Zara, the strange woman with glowing skin, was still here, sleeping on his couch in the main room. Jake quietly made his way to the kitchen area and started preparing breakfast. He had plenty of food stored, mostly simple things like protein bars, dried fruits, and instant coffee. Living alone on a mining world did not leave much room for fancy meals. As the coffee maker hummed to life, Jake heard movement from the main room. He looked over to see Zara sitting up on the couch, looking much better than she had the night before. The glowing lines on her skin were brighter now, pulsing with a steady rhythm. "Good morning," Jake said. "How are you feeling?" Zara touched the bandage on her shoulder and moved her arm carefully. "Better, thank you." "Coffee?" Jake asked, holding up a cup. Zara looked confused. "Coffee? It's a drink, hot, helps you wake up." Jake poured himself a cup and took a sip. "Though I should probably ask, can you eat human food?" "I do not know," Zara said honestly. "I have never tried." Jake made her a small portion of everything: coffee, a protein bar, and some dried fruit. He watched carefully as she tasted each item. The coffee made her eyes widen in surprise, but she seemed to like it. "This is pleasant," she said, taking another sip. They ate in comfortable silence for a while. Jake found himself studying Zara more closely in the morning light. Her skin really did change color slightly, shifting from pale silver to soft blue depending on how she moved. The patterns of light under her skin were beautiful, like living art. "Jake," Zara said suddenly, "I must tell you something important." Before Jake could respond, a loud beeping came from his communication console. The screen lit up with an emergency message. "Attention, unknown fleet detected in orbit. All civilians remain in shelters." Jake rushed to the window and looked up at the sky. Even in daylight, he could see them. Huge ships hanging in the atmosphere like silver clouds. There had to be at least 50 of them, maybe more. "Those are mine," Zara said quietly. Jake turned to stare at her. Yours? Zara stood up slowly, and as she did, something changed about her. She held herself differently, straighter, with a kind of natural authority that made Jake feel like he was suddenly in the presence of someone very important. My name is not just Zara, she said. I am Queen Zephyria of the Astral Dominion. Those ships belong to my people, the Etherians. Jake sat down heavily in his chair. You're a queen? I have ruled my people for 800 of your years, Zara, Zephyria, continued. Last night, I was fleeing from my own capital world. There was an attempt on my life by members of my own council. They want to remove me from power. Jake tried to process this information. The woman he had helped was not just an alien, she was alien royalty, and now her entire fleet was orbiting his planet. Why were they trying to kill you? Jake asked. Zephyria's expression grew sad. Because I have been trying to change things. For too long, my people have ruled through fear and power. We take what we want from other worlds and give nothing back. I wanted to build partnerships instead of conquering worlds. The old council said I was weak. That does not sound weak to me, Jake said. It sounds smart. Zephyria looked at him with surprise. You truly believe that? Of course, working together is always better than fighting. The communication console beeped again. This time, a voice came through, speaking in a language Jake did not understand. Zephyria listened, and her face grew dark. What did they say? Jake asked. They want me to surrender myself. They say if I do not come out in 1 hour, they will destroy this entire settlement to make sure I cannot escape again. Jake felt his blood run cold. They would kill innocent people just to get to you? The new council does not care about innocent lives, Zephyria said. They only care about power. Jake stood up and started pacing around the room. His military training was kicking in, and he was already thinking about options. The problem was he did not have many. How many people are loyal to you? Jake asked. I do not know. When I escaped, I could only trust a few of my personal guards. They helped me get to the escape pod, but I do not know if they survived. And how many people are in that fleet up there? Maybe 10,000 soldiers, plus support crews. Jake stopped pacing. 10,000 trained alien soldiers versus 1. Human and 1 injured queen. Not great odds. There is something else, Zephyria said. Something I do not understand. What? You helped me last night. You brought me into your home, gave me food and shelter, and asked for nothing in return. In 800 years, no one has ever done that for me. Jake looked at her with confusion. What do you mean? Everyone who has ever helped me wanted something back. Money, power, favors, titles. Even my closest advisors only serve me because I give them positions of authority. But you helped me because I needed help. Nothing more. That's what people do, Jake said simply. No, Zephyria said, and her voice was full of wonder. That is what humans do. My people have forgotten how to show kindness without expecting payment. We have forgotten how to trust. But you still remember. The communication console beeped again, and this time the message was in English. Human settlement, you have 30 minutes to surrender the fugitive. Do not make this harder than it needs to be. Jake walked over to his weapons locker and started, pulling out his old military gear. It was not much, a plasma rifle, some body armor, and a few grenades, but it was better than nothing. What are you doing? Zephyria asked. Getting ready to fight, Jake said as he checked his rifle's power cell. You cannot fight them. There are too many. Jake looked at her and smiled. Maybe, but I'm not going to let them hurt you. Not after you told me you were trying to make things better for everyone. Zephyria stared at him like she was seeing something impossible. You would risk your life for me? But you barely know me. I know enough, Jake said. I know you were trying to do the right thing. I know you care about innocent people. And I know that if those soldiers up there win, a lot of good people are going to suffer." For the first time since Jake had met her, Zephyria smiled. It was a beautiful smile that made the glowing patterns on her skin pulse brighter. "Then we fight together," she said. Jake finished checking his weapons and looked out the window again. The alien ships were getting lower in the sky, their silver shapes casting shadows across the red landscape of Kepler 442c. He could see smaller ships breaking away from the main fleet, landing craft filled with soldiers. "They're coming," Jake said. Zephyria stood beside him, her glowing patterns now pulsing with bright intensity. "I should surrender," she said. "You have done enough for me already." "No way," Jake replied firmly. "We're in this together now." Jake activated his mining station's defense systems. They were not meant for war, but they would have to do. Heavy barriers rose from the ground around his shelter, and automated laser turrets emerged from hidden positions. The mining equipment. He used to cut through rock, could also cut through armor. "Your mining tools can be weapons?" Zephyria asked with surprise. "Everything can be a weapon if you use it right," Jake said. Military lesson number 1. The first landing craft touched down about a kilometer away. Jake watched through his scope as armored figures poured out of the ships. They moved in perfect formation, like they had done this many times before. "Tell me about your soldiers," Jake said. "What are their strengths and weaknesses?" Zephyria thought for a moment. "They are strong and disciplined. Their armor can stop most energy weapons, but they think in patterns. They follow orders exactly and do not adapt well to unexpected situations." "Good," Jake said. "Humans are great at unexpected situations." Jake activated his communication system and sent out a false message that made it look like he and Zephyria had fled to the old mining tunnels on the east side of the settlement. Then he sealed all the entrances to his shelter except one, creating a bottleneck that would force the enemy soldiers to come at them in small groups. The first wave of soldiers reached his position within minutes. Jake watched them through his security cameras as they surrounded his shelter. They were tall and graceful, with the same shimmering skin as Zephyria, but wearing dark armor that covered most of their bodies. "They look like you," Jake observed. "They are my people," Zephyria said sadly. "But they follow the wrong leaders now." The soldiers tried to break down Jake's front door with energy weapons, but the reinforced metal held. Jake waited until they were all focused on the entrance, then activated his first surprise. The mining laser array he had hidden under the ground fired upward, creating a web of cutting beams that sliced through the soldiers' formation. Several of them fell, their armor smoking. The others scattered for cover behind rocks and mining equipment. "Impossible," came a voice through Jake's communication system. "How does a human have military-grade weapons?" Jake smiled and switched to a different channel. "This is Sergeant Jake Martinez, formerly of the Earth Defense Corps. You just walked into my kill zone." He activated his second surprise, the mining charges he had placed around his shelter. The explosions created clouds of dust and smoke that blocked the soldiers' vision. In the confusion, Jake opened his shelter's hidden exit and slipped outside with Zephyria. "Stay close," Jake whispered. "We need to reach the communication tower." They moved through the dust cloud, using the chaos to avoid detection. Jake's knowledge of the terrain gave them a huge advantage. He knew every rock, every mining shaft, every place to hide. When they reached the communication tower, Zephyria placed her hand on a control panel. The glowing patterns on her skin flowed into the machine, and suddenly the tower was broadcasting on frequencies Jake had never seen before. "What are you doing?" Jake asked. "Calling for help," Zephyria replied. "If any of my loyal forces are still alive, this signal will reach them." The response came faster than Jake expected. New ships appeared in the sky, smaller than the invasion fleet but moving with purpose. These ships were different colors, with gold markings instead of silver. My royal guard, Zephyria said with relief. They survived. The two fleets began, fighting in the sky above them, filling the air with energy beams and explosions. But Jake knew the battle in space would not help them on the ground. The enemy soldiers had found their position and were closing in. We need to move again, Jake said. They ran toward the mining complex with enemy soldiers chasing them. Jake used every trick he could think of, setting off mining charges to block passages, using the industrial machinery as cover, even turning on the ore processing systems to create noise and confusion. But there were too many soldiers and they were getting closer. Jake and Zephyria found themselves trapped in the main processing plant with enemies surrounding the building. I have an idea, Jake said, but it's dangerous. What is it? Zephyria asked. Jake pointed to the main ore crusher, a massive machine designed to break apart the hardest rocks. If we can overload that machine, it will create an explosion big enough to bring down this whole building. But we'll have to time it perfectly to escape. That is very risky, Zephyria said. Do you have a better idea? Zephyria looked around at their situation, then shook her head. No, let us do it. Jake began working on the crusher's control systems while Zephyria kept watch. The enemy soldiers were trying to break through the sealed doors and their energy. Weapons were slowly cutting through the metal. Almost got it, Jake muttered as he rewired the machine's safety systems. Jake, Zephyria said urgently, they are through the first door. The crusher began to vibrate as Jake pushed its systems, beyond their limits. Warning lights flashed everywhere, and the machine made sounds like it was tearing itself apart. Now we run, Jake said. They sprinted toward the emergency exit as the crusher finally exploded behind them. The blast was enormous, sending chunks of metal and rock flying in all directions. The entire processing plant began to collapse. Jake and Zephyria dove through the exit just as the building came down. When they looked back, half the enemy soldiers were buried under the rubble and the others were retreating in confusion. That was incredible, Zephyria said, breathing hard. How did you think of using the mining equipment like that? Humans are good at making things work in ways they were not supposed to, Jake replied. But their victory was short-lived. More landing craft were arriving, and Jake could see that some of the enemy ships in space were breaking away from the battle to focus on the ground. We cannot keep running forever, Zephyria said. Jake was about to agree when he noticed something wrong. His vision was getting blurry and he felt weak. When he looked down, he saw blood on his shirt. Jake! Zephyria caught him as he stumbled. You are hurt! A piece of metal from the explosion had cut deep into his side. Jake had been running on adrenaline, but now the injury was catching up with him. He was losing blood fast. I am fine, Jake said, but he clearly was not. No, you are not fine, Zephyria said. She looked at his wound with worry. This is serious. You need medical help. Jake tried to stand up straight, but the world was spinning. Just give me a minute. Zephyria looked around desperately. Enemy soldiers were approaching from 3 directions, and Jake was in no condition to fight or run. They were trapped, and time was running out. There is one way to save you, Zephyria said quietly, but you must trust me completely. What way? Jake asked. Zephyria's glowing patterns began to pulse brighter than ever before. I can share my life force with you through an Etherian bonding ritual. It will heal your wounds and give you strength. But Jake... But what? If I do this, we will be connected forever. Your life will be bound to mine, and mine to yours. You will never be fully human again. Jake looked at her, then at the approaching soldiers, then back at her. Even injured and scared, he managed to smile. Will it help us save your people from those who want to hurt them? Yes, Zephyria said. Then, do it. Zephyria placed her hands on Jake's chest, and the glowing patterns on her skin began to move. The lines of light flowed from her arms down to her fingertips, then into Jake's body. He felt a strange warmth spreading through him, like drinking. Hot coffee on a cold morning, but 1,000 times stronger. "Do not fight it," Scifi whispered. "Let the energy flow." Jake tried to relax as the alien energy filled his body. It felt like electricity, but not painful. Instead, it was like every cell in his body was waking up for the first time. The bleeding from his wound stopped, and the pain began to fade away. But something else was happening too. Jake could suddenly feel Scifi's emotions as if they were his own. Her fear for her people, her sadness about the war, her hope that they could stop the violence. It all flowed into his mind. And he could sense that she was feeling his emotions too. His determination to help innocent people, his military training, and tactical knowledge, his simple human desire to do what was right. The enemy soldiers were getting closer. Jake could hear their voices and the sound of their weapons charging. But he was changing, becoming something new. When the bonding ritual was complete, Jake opened his eyes and saw the world differently. Colors were brighter, sounds were clearer, and he could sense the life force of every living thing around him. But most importantly, he could feel Scifi's strength flowing through him, and his human knowledge flowing into her. "How do you feel?" Scifi asked. Jake stood up easily, the wound in his side completely healed. "Different, but still me." He looked at his hands and saw faint glowing lines under his skin, like a human version of Scifi's patterns. "What happens now?" "Now we fight as one," Scifi said. The first group of enemy soldiers rounded the corner and found them standing together in the open. The soldiers raised their weapons, but Jake was already moving. His enhanced reflexes let him dodge their energy blasts, while his human tactical training told him exactly where to strike back. Jake picked up a piece of metal debris and threw it with his new strength. The improvised weapon hit the lead soldier's chest plate and sent him flying backward into his teammates. Before the others could react, Scifi sent a wave of energy. That disabled their weapons. "Surrender," Scifi commanded with her royal authority. "I am still your queen." The soldiers looked confused and afraid. One of them removed his helmet, revealing a face similar to Scifi's but with silver patterns instead of blue ones. "You are no longer our queen," the soldier said. "The council has declared you a traitor, and now you have bonded with a primitive human. You have dishonored our entire species." "I have saved our species," Scifi replied calmly. "This human showed me what we have forgotten, how to help others without expecting anything in return." Jake stepped forward. "Your queen was trying to make peace. The people who sent you here only want power for themselves." The soldier laughed. "A human lecturing us about power. Your species has not even learned to travel between stars without destroying your own planet." "Maybe not," Jake said. "But we learned something your people forgot. We learned that strength comes from working together, not from conquering others." More soldiers arrived, surrounding them completely. Jake counted at least 20 enemies, all with weapons pointed at him and Scifi. Even with his new abilities, those were not good odds. But then something unexpected happened. Jake's enhanced senses picked up movement from above. Looking up, he saw Scifi's loyal ships landing nearby. Golden-armored soldiers poured out, engaging the silver-armored enemies in fierce combat. "My royal guard," Scifi said with relief. "Captain Vex must have received our signal." A tall Etherian in elaborate golden armor approached them, his weapon trained on the enemy soldiers. "My queen, we came as soon as we could. Are you injured?" "I am well, Captain Vex," Scifi replied. "Thanks to this human." Captain Vex looked at Jake with obvious curiosity. "This is the human who helped you? He looks different." Jake could see that his bonding with Scifi was visible to other Etherians. The faint glowing patterns under his skin marked him as something new, not fully human, but not Etherian either. "We have bonded," Zephyria explained. "He was dying, and it was the only way to save him." Captain Vex's eyes widened in shock. "My queen, bonding with an alien species has never been attempted. The consequences could be—" "The consequences," Jake interrupted, "are that we're stronger together than apart." To prove his point, Jake closed his eyes and extended his enhanced senses. He could feel the positions of every soldier in the area, both friend and enemy. More importantly, he could sense their intentions and emotions. "There are more enemy ships coming from the north," Jake said. "3 landing craft about 2 minutes away. And there's something else. The main fleet is preparing to bombard this entire area from orbit." Captain Vex checked his scanner and confirmed Jake's information. "Impossible. How did you know that?" "The bonding gave me access to Etherian sensing abilities," Jake explained. "But it also gave Zephyria access to human tactical thinking." Zephyria nodded. "I can see battle strategies that I never understood before. Jake's military knowledge is now part of me." Captain Vex looked between them with amazement. Then perhaps this bonding was meant to happen. The battle that followed was unlike anything Jake had ever experienced. With Zephyria's enhanced abilities and his tactical knowledge working together, they could predict enemy movements and coordinate their forces perfectly. Jake found himself giving orders to alien soldiers, using strategies that combined human military doctrine with Etherian technology. The Royal Guard responded to his commands without question, trusting their queen's judgment. When the orbital bombardment began, Jake knew exactly where the enemy would strike. He directed the evacuation of civilians, while Zephyria used her powers to create energy shields that protected the most vulnerable areas. "We cannot stay here," Captain Vex reported. "The enemy fleet is too large. We need to retreat." "No," Jake said firmly. "If we run now, they'll just follow us. We need to end this." "How?" Zephyria asked. Jake smiled, and she could feel his confidence through their bond. "We go home, to your capital world. It's time to take back your throne." Captain Vex looked shocked. "My queen, that would be suicide. The capital is heavily defended by the rebel council." "Not if we do it the human way," Jake said. "Your people expect a direct assault with overwhelming force. But humans learned long ago that sometimes the best way to win a war is to make the enemy defeat themselves." Zephyria understood immediately. Through their bond, she could see Jake's plan forming in his mind. It was risky, but it was also brilliant. "We will need to divide our forces," she said. "Some ships will create a distraction, while others infiltrate the capital." "Exactly," Jake agreed. "And will use their own arrogance against them. They think humans are primitive, and that you're weak for bonding with me. Let them keep thinking that until it's too late." Captain Vex still looked uncertain. "This plan depends on many variables. If anything goes wrong, then we'll adapt," Jake said. "That's what humans do best." As they boarded Zephyria's flagship and prepared to leave Kepler 442c, Jake looked back at his mining station one last time. Just 2 days ago, he had been a simple colonist living alone on a distant world. Now he was bonded to an alien queen and preparing to help her reclaim an empire. "Any regrets?" Zephyria asked, sensing his thoughts through their connection. Jake thought about it seriously. His old life had been quiet and safe. This new life would be full of danger and responsibility. But he would be helping to bring peace to an entire civilization. "No regrets," Jake said. "Let's go save your empire." The capital world of the astral dominion looked like something from a dream. Crystal spires reached into the purple sky, and cities of light floated above oceans that sparkled with their own inner glow. Jake had never seen anything so beautiful, but he could also see the signs of war: damaged buildings, military ships patrolling the skies, and energy barriers protecting the government districts. "It used to be more beautiful," Zephyria said sadly, as their ship approached the planet. Through their bond, Jake could feel her pain at seeing her homeworld turned into a fortress. "It will be again," Jake promised. Captain Vex approached them on the bridge. "My queen, our scouts report that the Rebel Council has gathered most of their fleet here. They are expecting us to attack directly." "Good," Jake said. "Let them keep expecting that." Jake's plan was simple but risky. Their ships would attack the outer defenses, making a lot of noise and drawing attention. Meanwhile, Jake and Zephyria would take a small team directly to the capital city using a captured enemy ship. "They will recognize the ship's identity codes," Captain Vex explained. "But if they detect that you are aboard—" "They won't," Jake interrupted, "because they'll be looking for an invasion fleet, not a diplomatic mission." Zephyria understood. "We will tell them I am coming to surrender." "Exactly. Your own council thinks you're weak for bonding with a human. They'll believe you're giving up." The plan began at dawn. Captain Vex led the main fleet in a direct assault on the orbital defense stations, exactly as the enemy expected. Explosions lit up space as the two fleets engaged in fierce combat. While everyone was watching the battle, Jake and Zephyria slipped through the planetary defenses in their captured ship. To the control towers, they appeared to be just another rebel vessel returning from the fight at Kepler 442c. "Incoming ship! Identify yourself!" came a voice over the communication system. Zephyria answered in her royal voice, but with a tone of defeat. "This is Queen Zephyria. I wish to speak with the council. I am ready to surrender." There was a long pause, then excited chatter in the background. Finally, the voice returned. "You will land at the government spaceport. Any attempt to escape will result in immediate destruction." "I understand," Zephyria replied. As their ship descended toward the Crystal City, Jake could see thousands of enemy soldiers surrounding the landing area. The Rebel Council was taking no chances. "You sure about this?" Jake asked. Zephyria squeezed his hand. "We are stronger together, remember?" They landed in the center of the spaceport, surrounded by weapons and soldiers. The ship's ramp lowered and Zephyria walked out, with her hands visible and empty. Jake followed close behind, his enhanced senses alert for any sign of danger. A tall Etherian in elaborate robes approached them. His skin patterns were gold and red, marking him as a high-ranking noble. Jake could sense his arrogance and contempt even before he spoke. "So," the noble said with a cruel smile, "the great Queen Zephyria returns, and she brings her pet human with her." "Counselor Theron," Zephyria replied calmly, "I see you have been busy in my absence. I have been saving our empire from your—" "Weakness," Theron said. "Your ideas about peace and cooperation would have destroyed us. The Astral Dominion was built on strength, not on helping inferior species." Jake stepped forward. "Inferior species? Is that what you think?" Theron laughed. "Look around you, human. You are surrounded by technology your primitive world cannot even imagine. What could you possibly offer us? How about the truth?" Jake said. Before Theron could respond, Jake activated a device hidden in his jacket. Suddenly, images appeared in the air above them, recordings from his time on Kepler 442c. The recordings showed the battle with the rebel forces, but more importantly, they showed something else. "What is this?" Theron demanded. "Security footage." "From my mining station," Jake explained. "Watch carefully." The images showed the real enemy, dark shapes moving between the rebel ships, creatures made of pure energy that seemed to feed on the conflict itself. These beings were manipulating both sides of the battle, growing stronger as more Etherians fought and died. "Impossible," Theron said, but Jake could sense his fear. "They're called devourers," Jake continued. "Energy beings that feed on civilizations. that become too focused on power and conquest. They've been manipulating your council, making you more aggressive and paranoid. Zephyria stepped forward. This is why I wanted to change our ways, Theron. The Devourers cannot feed on species that work together and help each other. They can only consume those who fight among themselves. The soldiers around them were murmuring, in confusion and fear. Many of them could see the truth in the recordings, battles that made no strategic sense, orders that seemed designed to cause maximum chaos, leaders who pushed for more violence even when peace was possible. Lies, Theron shouted. This human has poisoned your mind with his weakness. But as he spoke, something happened that proved Jake's point. The energy creatures from the recordings began to appear around them, drawn by the conflict and anger. They were barely visible, like heat waves in the air, but Jake's enhanced senses could see them clearly. Look around you, Jake said to the soldiers. Do you see them? They're here right now, feeding on your anger and fear. The Devourers began to take more solid form as they fed, becoming visible to everyone. They were horrible to look at, shapeless things made of hungry darkness that seemed to drain the light from everything around them. The soldiers raised their weapons, but energy blasts passed right through the creatures. They were not physical beings that could be shot or stabbed. How do we fight them? Captain Vex asked. He had arrived with reinforcements, but even his experienced soldiers looked terrified. We don't fight them, Jake said. We starve them. Jake took Zephyria's hand and reached out to the nearest soldier. Join with us, not as conquerors or subjects, but as partners. The soldier hesitated, then took Jake's other hand. Immediately, the devourer near them became less solid, as if it was losing strength. Everyone, Zephyria called out, join together. Show them that we choose cooperation over conflict. One by one, more soldiers joined the growing circle. Etherians, who had been fighting each other moments before, now stood together, united by a common purpose. As they did, the Devourers became weaker and weaker. Theron tried to stop them. You fools! You're destroying everything we've built! No, Jake said. We're building something better. The last Devourer faded away as the circle expanded to include even some of Theron's supporters. The creatures could not survive in an environment of cooperation and mutual respect. In the weeks that followed, Jake and Zephyria worked together to rebuild the Astral Dominion. The new government was based on the principles Jake had shown Zephyria, helping others without expecting anything in return, working together instead of conquering, and always protecting those who could not protect themselves. Jake became the first human to hold a position in an alien government, serving as Zephyria's partner and advisor. Together, they reached out to other species, offering friendship instead of domination. The galaxy was not transformed overnight. There were still conflicts and problems to solve, but for the first time in centuries, the Astral Dominion was growing through cooperation rather than conquest. One evening, as Jake and Zephyria stood on the balcony of the Crystal Palace, looking out at their peaceful city, she asked him a question. Do you ever think about that night on Kepler 442c, when you first brought me inside your shelter? Jake smiled. Every day. Best decision I ever made. Why? Zephyria asked. You gave up your quiet life for this complicated one? Jake looked at the city below, where Etherians and humans now worked together, where children of different species played in the same parks, where former enemies had become friends. Because, Jake said, one night of shelter turned into a lifetime of hope, and that's worth any sacrifice. Zephyria leaned against him, her patterns glowing softly in the twilight. Through their bond, Jake could feel her happiness and love, just as she could feel his contentment and peace. Sometimes, Jake thought, the smallest acts of kindness really could change the galaxy. All it took was one person willing to help another, no matter how different they might be. And sometimes that one night of shelter could become the foundation for an empire built on hope instead of fear.